In the ancient world where gods walked among mortals and shaped the very fabric of reality, there ruled a deity whose power rivaled that of Zeus himself. This was Poseidon, lord of all waters, shaker of the earth and master of storms. His domain stretched across every ocean, sea, river, and spring, and his temperament was as unpredictable and violent as the waves he commanded. To understand Poseidon is to understand the raw, untamed power of nature itself, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. Like his brothers Zeus and Hades, Poseidon's story begins in tragedy and darkness. He was the second son born to the Titan Kronos and the Titaness Rhea, entering a world already shadowed by his father's paranoia and cruelty. Kronos had received a prophecy that one of his children would overthrow him, just as he had overthrown his own father Uranus by castrating him with a great sickle. Consumed by fear of this destiny, Kronos made the monstrous decision to devour each of his children the moment they were born. Poseidon barely drew his first breath before his father seized him and swallowed him whole. Into the darkness of Kronos' belly he went, joining his older brother Hades and his older sisters Hestia and Demeter in that terrible prison. Later, his sister Hera would join them as well. For years they existed in this nightmarish captivity, conscious but unable to escape, suspended in a living tomb while their mother Rhea's heart broke with each lost child. When Zeus was finally born, Rhea had reached her breaking point. She hid the infant on the island of Crete and gave Kronos a stone wrapped in swaddling clothes to swallow instead. Zeus grew to adulthood in secret, and when he was ready, he returned with a powerful potion that forced Kronos to vomit up all the children he had consumed. They emerged fully grown, filled with justified rage at their father's cruelty, and thus began the Great Titanomachy, the war between the Olympian gods and the Titans. This war lasted 10 brutal years, shaking the foundations of the cosmos itself. The three brothers proved to be formidable warriors. The Cyclopes, grateful to be freed from their own imprisonment, forged mighty weapons for them. To Zeus went the thunderbolt that could split the sky. To Hades went the helm of darkness that granted invisibility. And to Poseidon they crafted the trident, a three-pronged spear of unimaginable power that would become his signature weapon and symbol. With this trident, Poseidon could command the seas to rise or fall, summon storms from clear skies, cause earthquakes that toppled mountains, and strike the ground to create springs of fresh water. The weapon was an extension of his will, responding to his emotions, which would prove both blessing and curse throughout his existence. When the Olympians finally achieved victory and imprisoned the Titans in the depths of Tartarus, it was time to divide the cosmos among the victors. The three brothers drew lots to determine who would rule which realm. Zeus drew the sky and became king of the gods. Hades drew the underworld and became lord of the dead. Poseidon drew the seas and all waters, becoming master of the oceans that covered most of the world. Some myths suggest Poseidon was content with this arrangement, while others hint at resentment that he did not receive the sky and kingship over the gods. This ambiguity in the myths reflects Poseidon's complex nature, never quite satisfied, always testing boundaries, much like the restless ocean itself. Poseidon established his magnificent palace in the depths of the Aegean Sea, a crystalline structure of coral and precious gems that gleamed even in the darkest ocean trenches. From this underwater throne, he ruled his vast domain with absolute authority. Sea creatures of all kinds obeyed his commands. Nymphs called Nereids attended him. Beautiful spirits of the sea who danced in the waves and sang songs that could calm even the fiercest storms. Tritons, mermen who were his sons and servants, would blow conch shell horns to announce his approach. When Poseidon traveled across his realm, he rode in a chariot made of gold and decorated with pearls, pulled by hippocampi, magnificent creatures that were part horse and part fish, with the front legs and head of a stallion, but the tail of a great sea serpent. These beasts could gallop across the surface of the water as easily as horses ran on land, their hooves never sinking beneath the waves. When Poseidon drove his chariot, the seas would part before him in respect and fear. Poseidon's personality was as turbulent as the ocean he ruled. He could be generous and helpful, granting safe passage to sailors who honored him with proper sacrifices, blessing fishermen with abundant catches, and protecting coastal cities that worshipped him faithfully. But he could also be vengeful, petty, and quick to anger. When insulted or denied what he believed was his due, Poseidon's wrath was terrible to behold. He would send devastating storms to sink entire fleets, cause earthquakes that destroyed cities, and unleash sea monsters to terrorize coasts for generations. His volatile nature led to numerous conflicts with other gods, mortals, and even his own family. One of the most famous disputes occurred when Poseidon competed with the goddess Athena for patronage of a city in Attica. The citizens declared they would worship whichever deity gave them the most useful gift. Poseidon struck the ground with his trident, and from the rock sprang either a saltwater spring, or in some versions, the first horse, a magnificent creature that could be used for transportation and warfare. Athena planted an olive tree whose fruit could be eaten, whose oil could light lamps and be used in cooking, and whose wood could be used for countless purposes. The citizens chose Athena's gift, and the city was named Athens in her honor. Poseidon was furious at this rejection. In his rage, he flooded the plain of Eleusis, causing tremendous damage and suffering. This story illustrates both Poseidon's competitive nature and his inability to gracefully accept defeat. His pride was immense, and slights against him, whether real or imagined, often resulted in devastating consequences for mortals. Another famous conflict involved the hero Odysseus, whose adventures are recorded in Homer's epic poem, The Odyssey. After the Trojan War, Odysseus blinded the Cyclops Polyphemus, not knowing the monster was Poseidon's son. When Polyphemus called out to his father for vengeance, Poseidon pursued Odysseus relentlessly for 10 years, sending storms to blow his ships off course, destroying his vessels and causing countless delays and hardships. Poseidon's grudge was so intense that Odysseus could not return home to Ithaca until Poseidon finally relented, and even then only because Zeus and other gods intervened on Odysseus's behalf. Despite his fearsome reputation, Poseidon was also associated with horses, which seems strange for a sea god until one understands the Greek worldview. Horses were seen as incredibly powerful, spirited, and sometimes uncontrollable creatures, much like the sea itself. Poseidon was credited with creating the first horse, and he was worshipped as Poseidon Hippias, the horse god. The Isthmian Games, one of the major athletic festivals in ancient Greece, were held in his honor and featured prominent horse racing events. Poseidon's romantic life was as tumultuous as every other aspect of his existence. His official wife was Amphitrite, a Nereid who initially rejected his advances and fled to the Atlas Mountains to escape him. Poseidon sent a dolphin to find her and persuade her to marry him, which the dolphin successfully accomplished. In gratitude, Poseidon placed the dolphin among the stars as the constellation Delphinus. Amphitrite became queen of the seas and bore Poseidon several children, including Triton, who became his father's herald and messenger. However, like most male Greek gods, Poseidon was far from faithful to his wife. He pursued countless affairs with goddesses, nymphs, and mortal women, producing an enormous number of offspring. Many of his children became famous figures in Greek mythology. With the Gorgon Medusa, before her transformation into a monster, he fathered the winged horse Pegasus and the giant Chrysaor. With various other mothers, he produced Theseus, the great hero of Athens, Orion, the mighty hunter who became a constellation, Polyphemus the Cyclops, Antaeus the giant who was invincible as long as he touched the earth, and countless other heroes, monsters, and minor gods. Not all of Poseidon's romantic pursuits were consensual. Many myths describe him pursuing women who tried to escape him, transforming themselves or being transformed by other gods to avoid his advances. The myth of Medusa's transformation into a Gorgon is particularly dark in this regard. According to some versions, Medusa was a beautiful priestess of Athena who was assaulted by Poseidon in Athena's temple. Rather than punishing Poseidon, Athena transformed Medusa into a monster whose gaze turned people to stone, essentially punishing the victim for the crime committed against her. This myth reflects the complicated and often troubling gender dynamics present throughout Greek mythology. Poseidon played significant roles in many of the great mythological events. During the Trojan War, he sided with the Greeks, harboring resentment against the Trojans because King Laomedon had once refused to pay him and Apollo for building the walls of Troy. Poseidon used his power to help the Greek forces, sending favorable winds and protecting their ships. However, his support came with conditions and could be withdrawn if he felt insulted, demonstrating again his conditional loyalty and sensitive pride. The god also had conflicts with his fellow Olympians beyond his rivalry with Athena. He once conspired with Hera and Athena to overthrow Zeus, believing his brother had become too tyrannical. They managed to bind Zeus while he slept, but the plan failed when the Nereid Thetis summoned the hundred-handed giant Briareus to free Zeus. As punishment, Poseidon was forced to serve the mortal king Laomedon for a year, during which time he built the walls of Troy. This humiliation likely contributed to his later animosity toward the city. The ancient Greeks both loved and feared Poseidon. Coastal cities and islands were particularly devoted to his worship, understanding that their survival depended on his favor. Sailors would pour libations into the sea before embarking on voyages, praying for calm waters and safe passage. Fishermen would offer the first and best of their catch to him. Cities would hold elaborate festivals in his honor, featuring athletic competitions, horse races, and bull sacrifices, for bulls were sacred to Poseidon. His temples were built near water, often on coastal promontories or on isthmuses. The most famous was the Temple of Poseidon at Cape Sunion, whose ruins still stand today overlooking the Aegean Sea. Ancient sailors would feel relief upon seeing this temple, knowing they were close to Athens and had survived their sea voyage under Poseidon's watchful eye. The god was invoked not just for protection at sea, but also for protection from earthquakes, which were common in the geologically active Greek world. As Earthshaker, Poseidon could cause or prevent the devastating tremors that could destroy entire cities in moments. Poseidon represents the awesome, indifferent power of nature that humans must respect but can never truly control. The sea gives life, providing fish for food and routes for trade and communication, but it also takes life, drowning sailors in storms and destroying coastal settlements with tsunamis. This duality made Poseidon one of the most complex and important gods in the Greek pantheon. He was not evil, but neither was he reliably good. He was a force of nature given divine form, and like nature itself, he could be both nurturing and catastrophically destructive. The myths of Poseidon remind us that the ancient Greeks lived in intimate relationship with natural forces they could not control. The sea was their highway, their source of food, and their connection to other lands, but it was also dangerous and unpredictable. Poseidon embodied this reality. He demanded respect, proper sacrifice, and acknowledgement of his power. When given these things, he could be a powerful ally. When denied or insulted, he became a terrifying enemy whose vengeance knew no bounds. In the end, Poseidon endures in human imagination, not despite his flaws, but because of them. He is neither purely heroic nor purely villainous, but deeply, recognizably flawed in ways that make him more real than a perfectly good deity could ever be. His pride, his anger, his generosity, his creativity, and his terrible power all reflect aspects of the natural world and of human nature itself. The Lord of the Seas remains one of mythology's most compelling figures, forever riding his golden chariot across endless waters, trident in hand, commanding the waves that connect and divide the world of mortals.